Hello and welcome back to Dream Room. If your backyard feels exposed, do not start by pricing a new fence. Start with one chair. Sit where you normally drink coffee, read, garden, or relax. Then look around. Is the real problem the neighbor's kitchen window? A second-story bedroom? A driveway beside your patio? In many small yards, you do not need to block the entire property. You only need to block one uncomfortable sightline, and that can save you thousands of dollars. A well-placed, fast-growing shrub or evergreen can create privacy, soften traffic noise, reduce wind, and make a small outdoor space feel much more peaceful. Some varieties can grow 2 to 5 feet in a good year, once established. But speed is not everything. The fastest tree in the garden center can become the biggest maintenance problem 5 years later if it is planted too close to your house, walkway, or neighbor's boundary. That matters especially if you have a narrow suburban yard, a townhouse patio, a small side garden, or only a few feet of planting space around your deck. Maybe you are over 60 and simply do not want to spend every spring climbing a ladder to trim a 25-foot hedge. Maybe you enjoy gardening, but you prefer simple jobs you can handle with hand pruners, a hose, and a comfortable afternoon. Or perhaps you are working with a modest budget. You want your garden to look beautiful from the living room window or home office, but you do not want expensive construction, heavy materials, or weeks of disruption. That is exactly what we are solving today. I will show you. 7 fast-growing trees and shrubs for neighborhood privacy. But more importantly, I will explain where each one actually belongs. We will look at tall evergreen screens, colorful shrubs, plants for partial shade, options for very narrow spaces, and even a solution that can work in large containers if you have a patio or rented outdoor area. And stay with me, because one of the most popular privacy trees on this list is also the one I would be most cautious about planting in a small backyard. The goal is not to build the tallest green wall possible. It is to create a comfortable outdoor room where your chair, plants, fountain, table, and favorite garden corner finally feel protected without making the space dark or crowded. So before you buy anything, measure your available width, notice where the sun falls, and identify the exact view you want to hide. That simple 5-minute check can prevent years of unnecessary pruning. If practical garden ideas, small space decorating, natural materials, and simple ways to make your home feel calmer and more beautiful sound useful to you, subscribe to Dream Room. Now, let us begin with one of the most dependable choices for a tall, year-round privacy screen. Green Giant Arborvitae. 1. Green Giant Arborvitae, best for a tall, reliable evergreen screen. If you want one of the simplest ways to create tall, year-round privacy, Green Giant Arborvitae is a strong place to start. Once established, it can grow roughly 3 to 5 feet per year. In favorable conditions, that means a young planting can begin changing the feeling of an exposed backyard surprisingly quickly. Its biggest advantage is density. The foliage stays green through winter, and the tree naturally develops a tall, pyramidal shape. That makes it especially useful when you need to block a neighbor's second-story window, a busy road, or a long property line. But here is where many homeowners make a mistake. They buy small trees, place them extremely close together, and expect instant privacy. A few years later, the plants are fighting for space, and the hedge becomes difficult to control. Instead, think about the mature tree first. Green Giant Arborvitae can eventually reach around 30 to 50 feet tall and spread roughly 10 to 18 feet. Depending on growing conditions, in many privacy plantings, spacing them around 5 to 8 feet apart can create coverage while still allowing room for healthy development. For a small garden, I also prefer a slightly staggered layout rather than a perfectly straight row. Imagine 3 or 5 trees positioned in a gentle zigzag behind your seating area. From the patio, the foliage overlaps visually, but the planting feels softer and more natural than a rigid green wall. This works beautifully if you have a simple bench, 2 outdoor chairs, a small fountain, or a coffee table tucked into that corner. You are not just hiding the neighbor. You are creating a backdrop for an outdoor room. Green Giant Arborvitae is also useful for homeowners who want relatively low-maintenance screening. Once established, it handles different soil conditions reasonably well and generally needs less constant shaping than a formal hedge. Still, give young trees consistent water during their first growing seasons. Fast growth only happens when roots have enough moisture and space to develop. And if you are over 60 or simply want a garden that becomes easier rather than harder to maintain, resist the temptation to let these trees grow into a problem. Plant them far enough from patios, foundations, paths, and fences that you will not be fighting their mature size later. For a long suburban boundary or a backyard that needs serious evergreen screening, Green Giant Arborvitae can be one of the most dependable choices. But what if your problem area receives only partial sun? That is where our next privacy plant becomes much more interesting. Well, cherry laurel, best for shady yards and fast ground-level privacy. If your privacy problem is closer to eye level, cherry laurel may be more useful than a towering tree. Its broad, glossy evergreen leaves create a thick visual barrier, which is exactly what you want when you are trying to hide a neighboring driveway, trash bins, utility equipment, or a plain fence behind your patio. And unlike many privacy plants, cherry laurel can perform well in partial shade. That makes it especially valuable beside a house, along a narrow side yard, or in a garden where sunlight changes throughout the day. The foliage is one of its biggest strengths. Because the leaves are wide and dense, the screen feels substantial. Even a relatively short hedge can make a seating area feel much more private than a row of thin, open-branched plants. Cherry laurel can eventually become quite large if left alone, but many homeowners keep it closer to 8 to 10 feet tall. For practical neighborhood screening, it also responds well to pruning. If you prefer a clean, formal garden, you can shape it into a neat hedge. If your yard feels better with a softer, more natural style, allow the top and sides to remain slightly loose. For small spaces, I often prefer that second approach. A perfectly straight hedge can make a narrow yard feel even narrower. Instead, create a gently curved planting bed. That small change can make the garden feel deeper, while still blocking the exact view you want to hide. Imagine a compact patio with 2 chairs and a small table. Behind them, a curved row of cherry laurel hides the neighbor's driveway while giving the seating area a lush green background. Simple, but effective. It is also a good choice for viewers who want privacy without turning every gardening job into a major project. You can maintain the hedge at a comfortable height rather than allowing it to become enormous. That is especially helpful if you prefer working with ordinary hand pruners and want to avoid ladders or heavy equipment later. Before planting, always check the mature size of the variety you are buying and make sure it is suitable for your local climate. The goal is not to squeeze as many shrubs as possible into a small strip of soil. The goal is to create a healthy, dense screen that still has room to breathe. For shady boundaries, small to medium gardens, and lower-level privacy, cherry laurel is one of the most practical evergreen choices. But what if you have almost no planting width at all? The next option grows more like a vertical curtain, making it especially useful beside patios and narrow spaces. SAR, Clumping Bamboo, best for narrow spaces and modern patios. If your garden is narrow and every foot matters, Clumping Bamboo can solve a privacy problem that wide shrubs cannot. Think of it as a vertical curtain. Instead of spreading outward into a broad hedge, Clumping Bamboo grows in tighter groups and sends tall canes upward. That makes it especially useful beside patios, along narrow side yards, or between a seating area and a neighboring property. The key word here is Clumping. Running bamboo can spread aggressively through underground rhizomes and become difficult to control. Clumping types behave very differently, staying in a much tighter area when properly selected and maintained. For small suburban gardens, that difference is critical. Some clumping varieties can reach around 10 to 40 feet tall, depending on the species and climate, while remaining relatively narrow compared with many trees. That height gives you strong vertical screening without taking over the entire floor area of the garden. And if you are renting, have a concrete patio, or simply do not want to dig into the ground, large containers can be a very practical solution. Place 2 or 3 substantial pots exactly where the sightline is strongest. You may not need a full wall of bamboo. If the neighbor's window is visible only from your favorite chair, block that one view first. This keeps the space open while still giving you the privacy you actually need. Bamboo also adds movement. When the wind passes through the leaves, the soft rustling sound can make a patio feel calmer and help soften some of the background noise from nearby homes or streets. For a clean, contemporary look, pair it with simple wood furniture, gravel, natural stone, or a small water feature. The combination feels light and uncluttered, which is especially useful in a compact outdoor space. If you are choosing bamboo for a small garden, look for clump-forming varieties such as Forsythia that are suited to your climate. And if you want even more control, containers or root barriers can help keep the planting exactly where you intended it to stay. For narrow patios, rented outdoor spaces, or homeowners who want privacy without sacrificing too much floor space, clumping bamboo is one of the most flexible options on this list. But perhaps you do not want your privacy screen to be entirely green. The next shrub adds something different. Color. SAR. Photinia Red Robin. Best when privacy also needs color. If you want privacy, but do not want your garden to become one long wall of green, Photinia Red Robin offers something different. Its biggest attraction is the new growth. Fresh leaves emerge in a vivid red tone before gradually maturing to deep green. That means your privacy hedge does more than block a view. It becomes part of the decoration itself. This is especially useful in a small garden where every plant needs to earn its place. Instead of using valuable space for one plant that provides privacy and another that provides color, Photinia can do both. It works well along a side boundary, behind a patio, or near an outdoor seating area where you want a screen that still feels lively and decorative. One of my favorite places to use it is where the hedge can also be seen from inside the house. If your living room window or home office desk looks directly toward the garden, a Photinia screen can improve that view throughout the year. Rather than staring at a fence, driveway, or neighboring wall, you see layers of red and green foliage. That makes the garden feel connected to the interior space. Photinia is commonly maintained at around 5 to 10 feet tall. Depending on the variety and how much privacy you need, it can be clipped into a formal hedge, but I would not automatically shear every surface into a perfect rectangle. Selective pruning can create a softer shape and allow the red new growth to remain more visible. This is particularly helpful in compact gardens. A slightly natural hedge usually feels less heavy than a perfectly flat wall, while still giving you the privacy you need. Spacing is also important. Do not crowd the plants simply because you want faster coverage. Leaving enough room for airflow helps the hedge develop more evenly and makes future maintenance easier. Photinia generally performs well in full sun to partial shade and adapts to a range of common garden soils. Before planting, check the mature dimensions of the variety available in your area, so the hedge will fit the space you actually have. For homeowners who enjoy neat landscaping but still want some seasonal character, Photinia Red Robin offers an excellent balance. You get screening, you get year-round structure, and when the new foliage appears, you also get a burst of color that keeps the boundary from feeling dull. Next, we move to a privacy shrub for people who prefer something even more controlled and polished. Waxleaf Privet. Use them for main. Zoll Waxleaf Privet. Best for a neat, controlled living wall. If you prefer a privacy screen that looks clean, controlled, and polished, Waxleaf Privet is one of the most practical choices. Its dense, evergreen foliage creates a solid green wall without needing the massive height of a large privacy tree. Waxleaf Privet can grow roughly 2 to 3 feet per year under good conditions and usually reaches around 6 to 12 feet tall, with a spread of approximately 6 to 7 feet. That makes it especially useful around patios, walkways, pool areas, and smaller garden rooms where you want privacy at a predictable height. The leaves are thick, glossy, and easy to shape. This gives you more control over the final appearance than many fast-growing trees. You can keep the hedge neat and formal, or allow it to grow slightly softer around the edges if you prefer a more relaxed garden. For a compact backyard, height matters. You do not always need a 20-foot screen. If your main concern is a neighbor looking toward your patio while you are sitting down, a hedge maintained around seated eye level may already provide enough privacy. That can be a much smarter solution. A lower hedge blocks the uncomfortable view while still allowing sunlight, open sky, and airflow into the garden. This is particularly important in narrow yards. A very tall hedge can sometimes make a small outdoor space feel boxed in. A controlled waxleaf privet screen can create separation without making the garden feel closed. It also works well for homeowners who enjoy a tidy landscape but do not want complicated maintenance. Waxleaf privet responds well to regular pruning, so you can maintain a clear shape using basic garden tools rather than allowing it to become oversized. It grows in full sun or partial shade, and can adapt to clay, loamy, and sandy soils, which makes it useful in many suburban landscapes. For a solid hedge, plants are often spaced around 3 to 4 feet apart, depending on the variety and the look you want to achieve. However, there is one important step before planting. Check whether the specific privet species you are considering is recommended in your region, because some types can behave invasively in certain areas. For a homeowner who wants a manageable, evergreen privacy wall around a patio or small garden, Waxleaf Privet offers a strong combination of density, flexibility, and control. But privacy does not always have to look formal. Our next choice proves that a screen can also bring one of the brightest displays of early spring. Forsythia. Forsythia, best for informal privacy and a spectacular spring display. If you want privacy without making the garden feel too formal, Forsythia is a very different choice from the evergreens we have covered so far. This fast-growing deciduous shrub is best known for its bright yellow flowers, which appear in early spring before the leaves fully develop. For many homeowners, that first burst of color is one of the clearest signs that winter is finally ending. After flowering, Forsythia fills out with dense green foliage that can provide good privacy through spring, summer, and into early fall. It can grow around 2 feet per year in favorable conditions and often reaches approximately 8 to 10 feet tall. That makes it useful along the back of a garden, beside a property boundary, or anywhere you want to soften an unattractive view during the months when you spend the most time outdoors. Forsythia works especially well in an informal landscape. Rather than cutting it into a perfectly rectangular hedge, allow some of its natural arching branches to remain. That looser shape can soften the hard lines of a wooden fence, garden shed, compost area, or neighboring structure. It also helps the garden feel more relaxed. This is particularly effective if your backyard already contains natural materials such as timber edging, stone paths, simple wooden seating, or cottage-style planting. One thing to remember is that Forsythia is deciduous, It loses its leaves in winter, so it will not provide the same 12-month screening as Arborvitae, cherry laurel, or privet. But that does not automatically make it a poor privacy plant. Many people use their patios and gardens most heavily, from spring through fall. If that describes you, seasonal screening may be more than enough. And if winter privacy still matters, use Forsythia as part of a mixed border. Place evergreen shrubs behind it or alternate sections of evergreen planting with Forsythia. You gain structure in winter, bright flowers in spring, and dense foliage through summer. The result often looks much more natural than repeating one identical plant along the entire boundary. Forsythia performs best in full sun and generally prefers moist, well-drained soil. For a dense, informal screen, plants are commonly spaced around 3 to 4 feet apart. For homeowners who want privacy, seasonal color, and a softer garden style, Forsythia offers something a plain evergreen hedge cannot. And now we come to the fastest and most dramatic option on the list. It can create impressive privacy quickly, but it also requires the most careful planning. Leyland Cypress. Z7. Leyland Cypress. Fastest impact, but only where you have the space. If your priority is fast, tall privacy, Leyland Cypress is one of the most dramatic choices on this list. It can grow roughly 3 to 4 feet per year under favorable conditions and may eventually reach 50 to 70 feet tall. That sounds perfect if you want privacy quickly, but this is also the plant I would approach most carefully in a small suburban yard. Leyland Cypress grows fast because it wants to become a very large tree. If you place it too close to a patio, house, walkway, or property line, the same speed that impressed you in the first few years can become a maintenance problem later. Its dense, blue-green foliage creates excellent year-round screening. That makes it useful when you need to hide a neighboring second-story window, a busy road, or a long exposed boundary. It can also create a strong visual backdrop behind a large lawn or garden. But space is essential. For a privacy screen, Leyland Cypress is often planted around 10 to 15 feet apart, depending on the final effect and growing conditions. Do not make the mistake of planting young trees shoulder to shoulder simply because they look small at the garden center. Always imagine the mature plant. Leyland Cypress also has a relatively shallow root system, which means exposed locations with strong winds require extra consideration. And because it grows so rapidly, regular trimming may be necessary if you want to keep the screen at a manageable height. That is why I would recommend it mainly for larger properties, long boundaries, and wide planting zones. If your backyard is narrow, or if you are over 60 and want to reduce future pruning, a more controlled shrub or a smaller evergreen may be the better decision. Compare it with Green Giant Arborvitae. Both can create tall evergreen privacy. Both grow quickly, but your available space, wind exposure, desired height, and willingness to prune should decide which one belongs in your garden. The lesson is simple. Never choose a privacy tree only because the label says fast-growing. Choose it because its mature size fits the space you actually have. For a large backyard where you need substantial screening quickly, Leyland Cypress can deliver impressive results. For a small garden, however, restraint is often the smarter design choice. And that brings us to the most important question of all. How do you combine these plants so your yard feels private without turning it into a dark green box? Conclusion: privacy, balance, and the right plant in the right place. The best privacy garden is not always the one with the tallest hedge. It is the one that blocks the views that bother you while still allowing sunlight, airflow, and a sense of openness. Green Giant Arborvitae works beautifully for tall evergreen screening. Cherry Laurel is useful where shade makes planting difficult. Clumping Bamboo fits narrow patios and compact spaces. Photinia Red Robin brings color. Waxleaf Privet gives you a controlled, polished hedge. Forsythia adds flowers and a softer natural shape, while Leyland Cypress can provide very fast coverage when you truly have the room for it. And you do not have to choose only one. A more natural solution is often to create layers. Use taller evergreens toward the back for second-story views. Add medium shrubs where neighbors can see directly into your seating area. Then soften the foreground with flowering plants, ornamental grasses, containers, or a small fountain. This creates privacy without making your backyard feel like a green tunnel. If you have a small patio, narrow side yard, rented deck, limited storage, or simply do not want a garden that demands constant heavy pruning, start small. Put your chair in the place where you actually relax. Look toward the problem. Then plant only where privacy is truly needed. Sometimes 2 shrubs in the right position can improve a garden more than 20 plants lined around the entire property. Before buying, always check mature height and width, sunlight, local climate, property boundaries, and underground utilities. A little planning now can save years of trimming later. Now I would love to hear about your garden. Which of these 7 privacy plants would you choose, and what view are you trying to hide? Tell us in the comments below. Your idea may help another Dream Room viewer with the same problem. And if you enjoy practical ideas for small gardens, patios, home decor, natural materials, and simple ways to make everyday spaces more comfortable, subscribe to Dream Room and follow the channel. Your private little retreat may be much closer than you think.